All right. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us today, November 20. As you all can see, today we are very glad to welcome you to our founders panel with five of BPIA's early and founding members. Um, this evening's program is titled BPIA at 35, a Sankofa moment, looking back to inform our future. This will feature our early and founding members, Zenobia Lewis, John Calvin Williams, Dr. Michelle Titi, Bertha Jackman, and Cynthia Johnson. These individuals have been with BPIA for the past 3 decades, actively and passively, supporting the organization through programming, mentoring, and different opportunities. And so we are very glad to have them join us this evening for a panel discussing BPIA's past and our future, and just kind of getting perspective from early and founding members. So without further ado, we will get into the program for the evening. But before we do so, I would like to welcome Michelle Washington, who is BPIA's Vice President for Education and Exchange, to give some welcoming remarks.
Good
Michelle?
evening. Thank you so much, Abe. Good evening, esteemed guests and BPI members, as well as colleagues. My name is Michelle Washington, and I am the Vice President of Professional Development for BPIA. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, we're excited that you are here with us. BPIA is an all-volunteer 501(c) nonprofit organization founded in 1989, committed to increasing the involvement of African Americans and those of African heritage in international affairs. International affairs touches defense, diplomacy, development, and intel. BPIA strengthens key partnerships by creating rich educational and professional development opportunities for members at all levels. Tonight, we are super excited to hear from our esteemed speakers and from everyone on the board, and my fellow board members and the president, and on behalf of the president of BPIA, welcome. We're excited to have this conversation tonight. Back to you, Abe.
Thank you, Michelle. And with that, we will get into this evening's program. Before we do that as well, I would take a moment to read short bios of our panel members before we get into this evening. So I will begin with Cynthia Johnson. Cynthia Johnson has been a member of BPIA since 1991 and served in various positions within the organization. She has been an administrator in higher education throughout her professional career. Her primary focus was developing and delivering advanced and certification programs for international professionals in a variety of occupations, including medicine, governance, and finance. She has been a member of BPIA since 1991 and served on the Governance Committee, the Nominations Committee, and the Scholarship Committee. Cynthia also served as Vice President for Professional Development, Assistant Secretary, Mentor, and Historian. Secondly, we have Zenobia Lewis. Zenobia has been a member of BPIA since 1989. She has served as Assistant Secretary and co-chair of several conferences. Zenobia's professional career began at the Internal Revenue Service as a revenue agent in 1982 in Oakland, California. She later transferred to Foreign Operations, which later became the Office of the Assistant Commissioner International. Her job took her to Canada, Italy, Greece, Spain, France, Switzerland, and England. As you can tell, Ms. Lewis is very well traveled. Zenobia later became a group manager and tax law specialist before leaving the IRS for the Peace Corps in 1998. Her first posting was on Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands in the South Pacific as Associate Director of Administration. After a coup in the country in the year 2000, Zenobia returned to the Peace Corps headquarters in Washington, D.C., and retired as a financial management officer in 2003. Next, we have John Calvin Williams, who goes by Cal. John Calvin Williams joined BPIA in 2005, serving as Vice President for Business and Economic Development until 2022. He retired from the IMF African Department in September 2004 after more than 22 years of service, including 2 years as an assistant to the U.S. Executive Director. Cal earned the rank of Senior Economist He served 3 years as the IMF resident representative in Zaire, which is now Congo, from 1987 to 1990, and 4 years in the same capacity in Mali from 1998 to 2002. Prior to the IMF, Cal was a commercial lending officer at the Chase Manhattan Bank with postings in New York, Paris, Geneva, and London. Cal graduated from Kansas State University in 1968 with honors and served 4 years as a Peace Corps volunteer in Niger, 1960 to 1971, and in Morocco, 1971 to 1972. Next, we have Michelle Titi. Dr. Michelle Cisco Titi enjoyed a 45-year career in international education and exchange. Her positions included Assistant Director, International and Multicultural Programs at the University of District of Columbia, Program Officer and Acting Executive Director at the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs, the Director at Peace Corps Fellows and USA, and Masters in International Programs at the US Peace Corps, and also as Program Officer in Professional Exchanges at the Meridian International Center. Dr. Titi earned a BA degree in French at Oberlin College and holds a Master of Education in Counseling and a PhD in Intercultural Communication from Howard University. We also have Bertha Jackman. Miss Bertha Jackman is from Paoli, suburb west of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. She first heard of the idea for an organization for Black professionals in international affairs while serving as an intern in the International and Multicultural Office at the University of the District of Columbia under the direction of Barbara Patterson, who was the founder of BPIA. Ms. Jackman is a founding and current member of BPIA since 1989. As a volunteer, she participated in its development and establishment and held various positions on committees and also served as a board member at large from 1989 to 1996 and also in other capacities. While serving with BPIA in Washington, D.C., Bertha worked as a program officer in the youth and education programs at Sister Cities International in Alexandria, Virginia, from 1986 to 1990. Then, from 1992 to 1996, she was a program coordinator at NAFSA, at the Association of International Education, International Educators. Ms. Jackman holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Health Administration from St. Joseph University in Philadelphia, 1982, and a master's degree in intercultural administration at the School for International Training, Experiment, and International Living, which is now World Learning Incorporated at Brattleboro, Vermont in 1985. Please join me in welcoming our panel members for the discussion this evening. And I turn it now over to Dr. Michelle Titi to moderate the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ave. Well, good evening, friends, and welcome to BPIA's Sankofa moment. Now, I know Michelle Williams is an AI lady, and she knows about AI, but I'm an old lady, and I feel kind of suspicious and distrustful of AI. But when I saw what AI had to say about Sankofa, and it looked halfway right, I said, okay, I'm going to share it with you. Sankofa is a word in the tree language of the Akan people of Ghana, and it means to retrieve or to go back and get it. It's most often symbolized by a bird, and most of you I know have seen this symbol, and the bird is looking back, but its feet are looking forward, and in its mouth, it's holding an egg. And the egg represents the knowledge of the past that can be used to create wisdom for the future. So that knowledge and that wisdom are what we're going to explore tonight in this discussion. Now, tonight, all of us on the panel, Earl Yates that I see out there, and our panelists were inspired to do this to honor and remember our founder, Barbara Patterson. And if you think about it, folks, If people are willing and wishing to remember and honor you years and years after they work with you, even after you have passed away, you know you have made a deep and lasting impression. And that's the way Barbara was. That's really the way she was. But here's a little bit more about her. Barbara Constance Patterson was born March 15th, 1933. She was the sixth of 7 children of the late Oscar W. Patterson and Fanny Dickerson Patterson of Roanoke, Virginia. She was an honor graduate class of 1955 of Bennett College, Greensboro, North Carolina, and boy, was she a loving Bennett girl. She loved that institution. And she earned a master's degree in anthropology and sociology from Howard University. She pursued advanced studies in international law and diplomacy at NYU. She taught social science at the College of West Africa in Monrovia, Liberia, served as Associate Dean of Students at Howard, and Director of the Africa Scholarship Program of the United Methodist Board in New York City. In 1969, she established the University of the District of Columbia's first Office of International Programs and Services. She retired to Roanoke in 1995 and departed this life January 24th, 2016. Now, BPIA has a long history, as we know, and there's so much to it. But tonight, I just wanted to touch on a few of the highlights, especially for those who are unfamiliar. So in the early 70s, Barbara was the director of international programs and services at UDC, as you heard, where I served as assistant director. Maud Stovall McCannon, then Maud Miller, was the administrative assistant, and later Bertha Jackman would join us as an intern. Some years later, this original UDC team was at Barbara's side, providing practical and administrative support as she brought BPIA into being. And what was the impetus for this? Well, Barbara had observed the relative dearth of African Americans and others in the diaspora involvement in international affairs. And she had been discussing it with others in the DC international community, and she decided that she wanted to establish an organization to address this issue. The first organizational meeting and interest meeting took place at a date which we have lost in the late 70s. But people from some 40 organizations participated in that first meeting. The official founding meeting of BPIA was held January 26th, 1989, in the Great Hall of the historic Charles Sumner Archives and Gallery in Washington, D.C. BPIA was incorporated in the District of Columbia and granted 501c3 tax-exempt status in March 1989. And I want to call the names of the signers of the Articles of Incorporation. They were Sachiko Good, then of the U.S. Peace Corps, Joyce Mortimer, a development consultant, Luttrell Osborne, Osborne and Associates, James Atwater, a Foreign Service officer at the U.S. Department of State, and James Lancaster, Academy for Educational Development. BPIA's first public event, the launch of the organization, was a fundraising dinner, as I recall, and I think this is correct, for travel study abroad scholarships under the theme, A Salute to African American Ambassadors, at the Loews L'Enfant Plaza Hotel in Washington, D.C. in November of 1990. 19 ambassadors were honored. Many, if not most of them, were present. It was a well-received, successful event that would set the quality standard for hundreds more BPIA programs to follow down through the years. And I think you'll agree that Alexandria and the current BPIA leaders are keeping up those programming standards. Now, those early programs included a total of 9 full, in most cases, almost all cases, 9 full 2-day in-person international affairs conferences held between 1991 and 2008. A scholarship program that at the time of these particular history notes had sent more than 22 students and scholars to 17 countries and supported several internships. Professional development and mentorship presentations, business and economic development forums, seminars and panels, and a newsletter in the 1990s called Global Visions that documented the organization's activities. In its 35-year history, we at BPIA have been truly gifted with exceptional presidential leadership. Time doesn't allow me to cite the details of their experience and talent, but I also want to call the names of the past presidents in our history who followed Ms. Patterson with their professional affiliations during their presidencies so that you can look them up. So you'll hear their name and then you'll hear what their professional affiliation was at that time, and you can look them up. Earl Yates, who is here with us today, was the first president to follow Barbara Patterson. William Bill Davis, Department of State and U.S. Secret Service. And Bill Davis was one of the first 5 Black men to serve in the U.S. Secret Service. He was a BPIA president. Dr. Macy King, political science, professor of political science at Howard University. Dr. Carol Henderson Tyson, USAID and Joint Center for Political Studies. And she's a member of the family that started one of the first Black travel agencies in the United States. Percy Wilson, U.S. Peace Corps, USAID, and Ambassador Sylvia Stansfield, Department of State, former U.S. Ambassador to Brunei. So now to our younger BPIA members, I'd like for you to note that what we did in the early days of BPIA was accomplished without benefit of social media. No smartphones, no texting, no email or other informational technology. But we accomplished what we did with snail mailing letters and invitations, following them up with multiple phone calls from desktop phones, word of mouth program promotion, etc. Later on, faxing came in as an amazing innovation, and cutting and pasting were literal. When I edited Global Vision's newsletter, I had to type up all the articles on a typewriter. And then when they're all typed out, I would cut them up, each article separately, and then I would paste them on blank sheets of paper, assemble the newsletter, and get it to a printer. So we've come a long way. I am admittedly biased, but I believe that given the challenges, BPIA's body of accomplishments in these 35 years has been huge. Its viability is remarkable, and I, for one, am grateful to have taken part in its establishment and early life. So now I think we're ready to hear from our panel. Ready, panel? Okay. So we developed a set of questions, and the panelists picked out the ones that they wanted to address. And so let's get started. So first, The first question is, Barbara Patterson provided many of us with lessons in leadership that served us well in our individual and professional lives. What leadership lessons did you learn from her? Zenobia?
Okay, I'm Zenobia, as Michelle said. Thank you. I first of all heard about BPIA through friends in Trans-Africa, another organization that I was a member of. At the time, I was working at the Internal Revenue Service Foreign Operations Division in DC. My first organizing meeting was October 1989. And then 2 months later, though, after that, I was posted to Sioux Falls, South Dakota as a first manager job, group manager there for IRS. But then 2 years later, I returned back to DC. And this is when I started working with Barbara on the 91 and the 93 conferences. And this gave me an opportunity to witness her leadership style. At the same time, while honing my own skills, while working on my master's degree during this same period at Notre Dame University of Maryland in Baltimore. Um, there were many, many work sessions in her home in Silver Spring, Maryland. She was always a very positive and always had an optimistic outlook. She delegated tasks in a very respectful manner and treated everyone as an equal, which created a good sense of unity and teamwork among all of us who were working with her. I observed her communication skills and how she interacted with people. She inspired and motivated all of us that were working with her to ensure that we have conferences that were a success. She was very empathetic, and I never heard her criticize anyone. She had integrity and she led by example. I also learned the protocol that was required to address in addressing ambassadors, CEOs, college presidents, top government officials, and so forth in letters and phone calls. And as Michelle mentioned, you know, we actually typed up letters, and at her home I would read them, and they were very, very interesting the way she had the proper way that was to address. And I also heard her telephone talk to some CEOs and government officials. So that was a good learning experience. And for a master's student like myself, that was an invaluable, in quotes, on the job training for me. And that's what I learned most in all of my, and the memories that I have of Barbara during that period. Just to comment about two other subsequent presidents that I worked with and their leadership skills. I worked with Earl Yates and Dr. Carl Tyson before I was off and about again. They had wonderful communication and leadership skills, and both of them fostered a unity and teamwork environment whenever we had the meetings at their homes. Again, we were still working at the homes. And talking about leadership, I must say Barbara's spirit is still all over BPIA. After listening to the candidates last night, I was very impressed with President Maloney and her team of executives in what was accomplished over the last year and what their plans are for the future. To me, it was not just the mission and goals, but it seemed the team has captured the essence and the soul of what it means to develop and mentor and expose individuals to international careers as reflected in the variety of workshops and activities during the past year. So I was very impressed with that, and I certainly wish the new leadership team continued success. Back to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Zenobia. And I think you are going to address the next question. Based on your BPIA experience, are there unique challenges that come with creating and maintaining internationally oriented Black organizations? If so, please explain.
Okay, I think there are probably many challenges. Right now, I'm just going to use myself as an example, just one challenge in maintain not just Black organization, but any international type organization where you have people who travel. And as I said, I'll use myself as an example. I always maintained my membership when I was going in and out of DC with my career. Always maintained the membership, but of course I was not around physically to volunteer in a leadership position. I remember I really wanted to emphasize education and working with HBCUs. That was what I wanted to do, but I realized that, I might be, since I'm in the middle of my career and I started in my mid-30s, my career, I would be moving around. So that was something that I couldn't volunteer for, to be on the executive board, like I wanted to. Um, but of course, and I think maybe one solution to that, of course, continue the current staggered terms that we have with people on the board, so that there is a continuation of keeping the organization going with their mission and goals. Back to you, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you, Z. The next question is, what are your most memorable events from BPIA's early days? And what made them memorable? Bertha? You're on mute. You're muted. You're muted.
Okay, there we are.
There we are.
Thank you very much. All right, my name is Bertha Jackman, and I'm one of the founding members. I was involved with the initial organizing of BPIA. My memories, there's a whole lot, but the ones that I decided to talk about were just a couple of them. One was the organizing meetings that we did have. We all got together and we would meet as Zenobia mentioned, we would meet at various people's homes. And it was just the idea of all of us working towards something. And we would break up into small groups and go into different rooms in people's homes. We had fabulous meals, and it's just the camaraderie. But I remember the feeling that we were doing something important. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. My other memory in those meetings was talking about the name of the organization. I have mentioned this before, but it's sort of odd to have a name, an organization name with the same word twice. In other words, we are the International Association of Black Professionals in International Affairs. And I just remember the discussions of going around with that, how many times we're going to use the word international. But as you see, we decided that it was important enough to maintain it. And then gratefully, we have the shortcut, Black Professionals in International Affairs, but it's just the idea of the entire name and what it meant to us. The other memory that I have is being called one of Barbara's girls. Michelle mentioned a little bit earlier about when we were all at UDC, at the University of the District of Columbia. And she mentioned that, she was the head because she was the assistant director. And then Maud was the assistant administrator, I believe. And then myself as an intern. Administrative assistant, thank you very much. And then I came along as an intern, and my internship, by the way, was from September of 1983 to June of 1984, and it was unpaid. and now I just bring that up because when as an inspiration to other folks, I've talked to young people and talking about internships. I discovered that internships are helpful because it helps you decide, is this what you really want to do? Or it can help you decide, no, this particular field is not for me. It works both ways. So of course, with the internship that I had with my mentors, I decided to stay within the international field. But anyway, but being called one of Barbara's girls, I understand that there were several people around the university that would call us that because Barbara was known to be upright and as Michelle mentioned, had high standards. So therefore, she was the leader of Michelle, Maud, and myself, and I am still honored to be called one of Barbara's girls. So I think I'll leave it at that for the moment.
Okay, thank you, Bertha.
Mhm.
Our next question goes to Cynthia Johnson, who for many years was the historian of BPIA and an excellent one at that. She also ran the BPIA elections. Okay, so Cynthia, BPIA went through a few years of low activity before a revival in 2015 under the presidency of Ambassador Sylvia Stanfield with a revitalized board of directors. How can people assure the continuing viability of homegrown, all-volunteer organizations like BPIA?
I'm Cynthia Johnson, and I first got involved with BPIA in 1991 when I first moved to the Washington, D.C. area from Philadelphia. I attended one of the lectures. My cousin actually invited me to one of the lectures. He was one of the panelists. And after the lecture, I sort of just stood around and Barbara came up to me and she said, "You want to come help us lick some stamps and write some envelopes?" I said, "Okay, that sounds good." And so I like to say that I've been licking stamps and writing envelopes ever since. So I was fortunate to serve under a number of the presidents and got so much out of that sense of family. Ambassador Stanfield, when she took office in 2015, she had a directive. Her goal was to revitalize and reinvigorate BPIA. We had just come off of a pretty sizable Ford grant, and there had been a lot of energy around that grant, but our energy kind of dissipated. So she wanted to bring the people back together, recreate that sense of community, and start focusing on our operations and our infrastructure. So she sent out an email to former members, current members, supporters, and friends, asking them to join us in bringing BPIA back into a positive light. And the response was really overwhelming. We were just really pleased at those who wanted to join us and be a part of this new venture for us. So she set some goals for herself and for the organization. She actually had us, I would say, focus on a number of things. One was building up the membership, bringing up the sense of community, again, revitalizing that sense of community, focusing on the infrastructure, and fine-tuning our operations. She developed a governance committee and had the governance committee look at a couple of things: bylaws, procedures, and how we operated and how we communicated with one another. So the governance committee actually went through the bylaws line by line and found out that we were non-compliant with a couple of areas. Some of the IRS guidelines were not being met. We were not really consistent with following the Roberts Rules of Order. And we had some legal questions that were not really being met with the language that we were using in the bylaws. So the governance committee, because we didn't really have any kind of set guidebook, we went through all of our past minutes for, must have been 7 or 10 years of minutes, notes, and conversations with one another, trying to figure out when decisions were made, how decisions were made, and what changes were made to the guidelines and to the bylaws. So we actually documented all of those findings so that anyone coming after us, any leaders coming after us, would not have to go through those steps all over again. So we documented and recorded, and put notes on different documents that were legal or financial or whatever we needed to refer to on a historic basis. So we wanted to make sure that no one had to go through that anguish that we went through years ago. One of the things that really precipitated our action and our energy around this was in 2011, BPIA actually lost our 501c3 status with the IRS. What happened was we were moving quite a bit and using different addresses, and we failed to notify the IRS of our new address. They've been trying to get some additional information from us for about 3 years. We didn't get the request. As you know, as Michelle had mentioned, we didn't have email, we had snail mail. We never got that letter that was addressed to Howard University. So our 501c3 status was revoked. And we were under the gun to try to get that renewed and have that status put back in place because it was so important to our organization. So we went through many, many documents, took pains to record and document the steps we had taken so that it wouldn't happen again. One of the other things that she was very, very concerned about was building leadership for the future, making a plan for succession planning. So she created a very successful mentoring program, expanded the internship program, and actually fine-tuned the guidelines, the bylaws, so that the board would always stagger an incoming board, which means each term would overlap with a new term. So one half of the board would finish their term while the second half of the board had 1 more year to continue, so that we had that continuity and consistency from one board to the other. And that allowed all of the new leaders to have that rich resource and that pathway of experience to guide them and provide any information that might be needed on a historical basis. So that turned out to be pretty successful. So when we're talking about what do volunteer organizations need in order to be successful, I would say a strong bylaws that you read and make sure that it's compliant with all of your governing bodies, and actionable operational bylaws. Procedures, we actually developed a procedures manual for both the board and for the members that was giving a step-by-step continuity of what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and what the expectations are. And then also developing a path for succession planning, developing those leaders from within the organization and preparing them to take on after we move off. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Some strong principles to follow. Okay, next question. At one point, BPIA had a grant-funded physical office with an executive director. Those grants came from the Ford Foundation, but it was unable to maintain the funding. Could the organization benefit from an administrative structure like this if it could be reestablished? What are your opinions? And we'll begin with Cal and Bertha and Cynthia, if you have responses as well.
Thank you, Michelle. I believe, this is my opinion, I believe the BPIA could benefit from such a grant in the future, primarily because it provides the administrative infrastructure that supports the volunteer leadership of the organization. The leadership sets the goals, objectives, and standards, but there are certain administrative procedures that need to be followed. I was fortunate to join the board in 2005 when we did have the grant, and we also had an executive director, Cindy Matumbo Davis. She was very, very good. We had an office on George Avenue, and we had a filing system. We had administrative procedures in place to monitor membership, to support, for instance, meetings. That was a conference room for meetings. And it provided also a permanent address. People have mentioned in the past that were previously mail was being sent to individuals' home addresses. When we had the office, that was our official address, recognized by the District of Columbia and also by the IRS. And so that structure provided a framework within which the volunteer leadership could lead the organization, set direction, set goals and objectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Bertha, do you have something to add?
Yes, along with that, I was thinking that this is my opinion, that if there could be a professional grant writer on board, not necessarily a board position, but either a professional grant writer or someone who volunteers who can be in the loop and stay in the loop about the various grant opportunities in order to maintain some kind of ongoing funding in order to have a physical office and a paid administrator.
Okay. Cynthia, anything else on that question?
Well, yes, I'd like to just echo what both Cal and Bertha mentioned. We were quite fortunate to get that Ford grant. It was funded in 2005 for about 3 years and then renewed for an additional 2 years. And we were able to do quite a few things as a result of that funding, but having a sustained source of revenue was critical. And that was one thing we did not do, but something you certainly want to consider and put in place for the future because it's paramount to your success.
Okay, thank you. Now, number 7 asks, do you have a favorite Barbara Patterson memory or quote you'd care to share? And I think we will hear from Cynthia and Bertha.
Well, I mentioned that Barbara just created such a sense of family. You were just committed to the organization, committing to doing and volunteering when you could and whatever you could. And I guess that's why my tenure was so long. I was pretty good at keeping notes. So very often I would be called on to find some obscure document from 20 years ago, and I was probably able to find it. So she just really ensued in us that commitment and that sense of family. And I just always appreciated having that sense of belonging. I had a home, I had a family, so I was committed.
So true. Bertha?
Yes, one of the quotes that I remember from Barbara is, "There's nothing like face-to-face interaction." And the story behind that is, I had already known this, but to hear her say that again, there's nothing like face-to-face interaction. And going back to what Michelle said earlier, that these were the days before, all that different internet and AI and text messaging and
Zoom.
emails and all of that, and fax machines and so on. So the reason why I'm talking about this is because there was a time when I was assisting in the doing my internship, assisting in the preparation of one of the programs sponsored by the office, the International Multicultural Office at UDC. And she said, instead of calling the particular office that was a couple of floors lower underneath where our office was, to contact this particular office that provided the podium and the flowers and all of the setups for any kind of an event. She said, you go down there and you talk to that man face to face. And she said, because it means a lot. And like I said, I had already known that, but to hear her say that and to insist upon that, I have been using that little lesson ever since. Whenever I'm involved in organizing anything, my thought goes back to Barbara. Face-to-face communication, or these days, if you have to pick up the phone or you actually even go to the place. I know a lot of people don't do that much anymore, but it's the social interaction and the communication that means everything. It makes a difference.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll go to our last question. We're going to Cal for that one. Since BPIA's founding, Black engagement in international affairs has noticeably increased. For example, we've had not one, but two Black secretaries of state, not to mention a Black president. Given these developments, why is an organization like BPIA still needed?
Thank you, Michelle. I feel an organization like BPI is needed precisely because of the situation we find ourselves in today. The gains that have been accomplished in the past are fragile. And when the political landscape changes, opportunities change for minorities, particularly African Americans, but other minorities also. And it's necessary to have in place a support network for young professionals in particular, because young professionals who are going into the workplace today in foreign affairs are going to be facing a much more hostile environment than they faced under the Secretaries of State Powell and Condoleezza Rice. It's imperative that we as a group support each other. We, the older members of BPIA, can provide support and encouragement to young professionals as they struggle with their careers. And the young professionals can network among themselves and find out what tools work, let's say, in a certain situation to help advance their careers or counter a particular difficult problem. I have a young lady that I met with BPIA. She's in the State Department. She was in a very difficult position for 2 years overseas. She suffered because of discrimination. We talked. I think it helped her. Now she's in a very comfortable position in a European capital. But I know that our conversations were instrumental in helping her to cope with these challenges. I see among the leadership of BPI now inspiring young leaders, and they can inspire other young people to get involved in international affairs and also to help them and support them in their careers. It's going to be a difficult challenge over the next 4 years. We have to face the facts. If we look at what happened in education, higher education, representation of minorities, African Americans in particular, has gone down since decisions by the Supreme Court of the court. And so BPIA is just as important now, just as needed now as it was back when it was founded in 1989 by Barbara Patterson. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Cal. So now we're about ready to move into our question and answer session. Before we do, I do want to, and I hope I don't leave anybody out. I know that we have with us two of the very early members of BPIA, Musu Clemens and Dr. Richard Lowry from Bowie State University. We're so happy to see your faces, to see you here today. So thank you for coming. Did I miss any? And Earl has something you want to say?
And Gail Hansberry, and you.
Gail, I didn't see Gail.
Yes.
Yeah, Gail Hansberry was here very, very early on. I didn't see you. Sorry, Gail. I was looking to try not to leave anybody out. But yes, we're so happy to have our our early and founding members with us. Earl, you wanted to say something?
Well, I was clapping just because I was so glad to see Musu and Rich Lowry and those folks here from back in the day. But it drives another point about this whole thing, and I would just very much want to thank and salute BPIA in this panel for drawing on the spirit of Sankofa, as important as that is. I think that as the organization moves forward beyond the 35 years, it will do so with energy, with imagination, but can always gain by the looking back to the past, carrying that with them, not letting it be a drag, but letting it be the inspiration and the guide and the anchor for what it does before. And I think it's that this panel and others like this, and just a spirit in the organization of valuing and protecting the history is important. In fact, if I do this correctly, I've just put in the chat a notion that I would raise in this call, and we'll probably raise it in the upcoming business meeting. And it's the proposal that BPIA establish a history committee that be established by the board to do the business of gathering or recovering, maintaining, and making available to the membership at least the organizational history, the program development and implementation history, and the legal identity history of the organization. Because it can cruise along for a while, but as we saw in the past, the bottom can drop out here and there, and you can lose that. So I think it would be an important initiative to do that. And I've put it there in the chat, and I plan to participate in the members meeting to put that before the board as a suggestion.
Great. It sounds great. Rick, did you want to say something?
Musu.
Musu?
Yes, I do. I am so delighted to be able to join you tonight. It brings back so many memories of our early days, from the founding meeting to the conferences that we had. But most of all, it makes me reflect on the leadership that Barbara Patterson played. I remember her saying to me one time, "Musu, your mama sent you to me." It meant that, it was nothing she could ask me to do that I could refuse. And you never wanted to refuse because she gave of herself. I remember Barbara making those connections that show it is a village for us to support each other. I remember specifically her reaching out to a counselor officer in the Bahamas, where she would get him to help with the visas for her students at UDC. Just having the connections, being able to call, as Bertha says, being able to call captains of industry, call ambassadors, call preachers who we could draw upon to support what we were trying to do. And just to see that BPIA has blossomed into what it is now, I am so very proud of the young people. And it makes me really happy to see it. So that's what I wanted to share.
Yes, I'm so glad you could join us. And Rick, did you have your hand up? You want to say something?
No, I'm just so delighted. I'm delighted three ways. Number one, I'm delighted to be anywhere at my age. Number two, I'm delighted to see so many faces and memories from the past. You uplift a brother, and I thank you for that. And Michelle, thank you so much for connecting with me and just bringing it all back. And I'm planning to resume activity, and I'm still pretending to teach. I figure somebody's got to flunk them. And since I'm not a golfer, I figure I might as well keep on doing what I like doing. So thank you for the memories, the recollections, and the good times.
And thank you for coming back. Now, Gail, I can't see you, and I don't know if you wish to speak or not, but if you wish to say something, please do. I don't know why I can't see Gail.
Well, my picture is up there.
There you are. I see you. I see you. I see you.
Well, BPIA was very important and something that I was always interested in. I grew up in an international arena, I guess you might say. My father started teaching African history at Howard University in 1922, I believe. And he was one of the first academically trained people, or the first academically trained person to teach African history. So I knew that Africa had a past, that mankind originated in Africa. And so I always was around Africans and people of all sorts of people, particularly Ethiopians and Nigerians. So BPIA was a natural continuation of this. I was also a member, or remember when Thursday Luncheon Group was in effect, and there was always an effort to get more Blacks into international affairs. So this was sort of a natural progression, and it's so good to see that it has continued all these years. And as someone just said, even in this day and age, we probably still need an organization to help many people of color to overcome some of the obstacles that have presented themselves in the past few years. So my hat is off to BPIA. I'm not a continuing dues-paying member, but you do have my interest and concern, and all of the best for the future. And it's so good to see some of the people who were there earlier on, and to remember Barbara Patterson as well.
Thank you so much, Gail. And this isn't internationally related, but I do want to share with you that Gail is, now tell me, correct me if I'm wrong, but Gail is the niece of Lorraine Hansberry,
No, cousin.
cousin of Lorraine Hansberry, who wrote A Raisin in the Sun.
Her father and my father were brothers, and
My-
her interest in Africa probably came from my father. They were born, my father and her father, Carl Hansberry, were born in Mississippi. And he left Mississippi and went to Atlanta University and then to Harvard. And the only thing that he said about Mississippi was, it's a great place to be from. And that was all that I knew about his upbringing or growing up. But he always had an interest in Africa. His father was a historian, or taught history, I understand, at Alcorn College, and he continued in wanting to know about the history of Black people, Africa, and the fact that mankind originated in Africa. So we were so-called primitive people. Primitive means first, so we were the first people. And if everybody knew that, I think the world would be a better place now.
Okay, thank you. I stand corrected. I have forgotten when I thought about the play and I heard you talking. Oh, yes, there was an Africa connection.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed.
All right, well, thank you. And so I'm happy, Abe, to hear that you're going to help with the Q&A session. But I will say that if you wish to ask a question or make a comment, you can raise your, if some people don't do this and they're not aware, but if in case you're not aware, you see a little react heart at the bottom of the page. You can click on that to raise your hand to ask a question,
Yeah.
or you can put your question in the chat.
Yeah, and to help better streamline it, because assuming that many people, at least several people, have a question at the same time, it can get easily confusing. But I'm gonna speak for, oh, you go. So please feel free to put your question in the chat, and I can read them out loud. And as we go, if you feel like raising your hand, if you feel like putting it in the chat, that goes well as well. But we have one question thus far in the chat. And this is to the general panel, and also to other founding members, other founding and early members who are also on the call tonight. The question is, what led you to a career in international affairs, and how can I as in the individual, or general audience as well, amplify your past to inspire the future, to also explore a career in international relations? And they also added that they truly wish they had this awareness in college. So
By the way, I'm not able to raise my hand, but I have a question.
okay. After this
Put it
question,
in-
get to you.
Okay.
Put
All
it
right.
in the
So generally, again, the question is, what led you to a career in international affairs, and how can we amplify our past to inspire the future and also explore a career in the field?
Let me start then, if no one else is talking. I guess what inspired me is it somehow came naturally because I'm from a bicultural family, Liberian and American, African American. And so just always having interest and family and feet in one place or the other, is just being curious about what's happening on the other side of the world. So that inspired me to look to international work as possible as a possible career path. And whenever I speak to young people who are interested in it, I said, start local. In every city in this country, you can find people who come from another country in your church, in your schools. Make connections with people who come from a different place and start learning about it. And our young people, many of them are not aware of what a fabulous life you can have internationally. So I always try to explain what it means to be overseas. What are you gaining by having a different worldview or an additional worldview? So I always use the example of my own family as a way, as a pathway. Thank you.
And this is Bertha Jackman. I just want to add to what Musu just said, because I guess I had not thought of that question and what it means. And so I'm thinking that my earliest experience was international students in the exchange programs in school, in high school. And in fact, I ended up being involved in the International Students Club, because I always found that people from other places were very, very interesting. The culture, the culture and everything that goes along with that. So I'm thinking that's where my interest started to come from. But not only that, now that I think about it, going back to my own street in Little Paoli, a little suburb outside of Philadelphia. And when I was a young child, on my street, we had a whole variety of different kinds of people. We had Mexicans, Italians, Germans, Irish, and some other folks. And I remember thinking, well, that was interesting. How did they get to be on this street? And so my mother had, friends from the various different groups. And so now that I'm thinking about it, it actually went back to my early childhood. So just like Musu said, in every town and just about every city, there's someone from someplace else, whether it's international or on the other side of this country. So and just like she said, you get to know them, you learn about them, the differences, and the many similarities. So I think that's what helped inspire me to get into the whole international field. And not only that, but my children, I have two sons, and their father is from the Republic of Benin. So that's how far that whole international interest went.
Mhm.
Yeah,
All
thank
right.
you. I see we also have two hands, Dorothy and Michelle. I think I saw Dorothy's first. Miss Dorothy Davis, please feel free to come off mute and ask your question. You're on mute. There we go.
Hello to everyone. I'm Dorothy Davis, and my father was Griff Davis, and he and Barbara Patterson were very good friends, and she was, well, I always felt she was a friend of mine, even though she was older than me. She was also the peacemaker between my dad and me when I was being rambunctious. And so he would kind of send her to me to kind of talk sense to me. So she and I had a special bond. I remember when she was at UDC, and it was downtown DC. That's all I remember. And she was working on it. I remember that it was around the time that my father was working on establishing the Thursday Luncheon Group. So they were talking all the time about how there wasn't really any support for foreign service officers or anybody who was Black in international affairs. And swap stories. My dad was a pioneer foreign service officer. Um, he was stationed in Liberia, Tunisia, Nigeria, but his work at USAID, took him all over Africa. And therefore, I was born in Liberia, and so I was born into international, and I've been international all my life, including now, where I work with the UN. So I am so glad to see that the idea that Barbara had has blossomed to this point. I know she would be very happy. You're listening to you is bringing back all these memories I have of her, and her kindness and her gentleness, and her strength. So I just appreciate that you are celebrating her by celebrating BPIA.
We're so happy you could join us, and thank you, Gail, for telling Dorothy.
Oh, yes, I'm glad, even though it was a rather last minute thing that I did. Griff Davis was a Foreign Service officer with a large body of photographs, and so everybody should become familiar with his photography as well as his work as a Foreign Service officer. So I'm glad Dorothy could join us this evening. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dorothy, for sharing that. We have Michelle Washington as well, please.
Hi, good evening again, everyone. Again, Michelle Washington, current board member. So excited that we're here having this discussion tonight. I think I want to kind of touch on and to get the ideas from you all regarding grants, right? I want to revisit that as well as the internships. We are facing a very unique landscape right now. There's a rollback in investment of DEI programs. It's also very competitive, right? There's a surge in organizations that are competing for a lot of the same pots of money. And what we're seeing is a very, very difficult environment. And so we have seen other organizations get creative, and we actually have a grants individual here in BPIA, and that person, you'll see the annual report coming out in December where it has what we've been able to raise. But the number that we're able to raise wouldn't sustain an administrative infrastructure, not just because DC and the cost of what you can get in DC is astronomical, but also because now interns don't really want to intern anymore. They want job experience. They want paid. They want to be paid. They want benefits. We're seeing that at the State Department and Congress, who have recently transitioned into all paid internships. And so I guess the question that I would like to put forward is, are there any ideas on how we can further identify grants, long sustaining grants, and then how can we more utilize some of our growing partnerships so that we can kind of secure the financing at the level to sustain in the current fiscal environment? Welcome any ideas or thoughts or advice.
I have a question. Is there any possibility for any of our partners to provide paid internships? I'm sure you've already explored that, but
yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, I live in Arkansas, Jonesboro, and the Spanish organization, they call it El Centro. They provide paid internship for people or for individuals with skills in business finance or business accounting, for example. Yeah. But while I'm also, I have a chance to talk to the group, I have a little bit of an issue going on.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to hold that thought for a moment. We're going to open it up to the rest of the panel right now who's asking the question, who's answering the question, sir. So if you can just hold your thought and allow the panel to share their thoughts on my question.
Okay, all right, I'll do that. But as I said, I have an opportunity through this organization here in Jonesboro, Arkansas.
We'll have to talk offline. Thank you so much.
All right.
Are there any panelists that can, oh, I think Mr. Cal Williams.
Yeah, one thing I would say is, first, you've reinforced my earlier response to the first question I asked. Do we need a grant like the Ford Foundation grant? That would provide the framework for looking for future grants and also for paying interns. And with respect to paying interns, I remember when I was in the board, one of the concerns was if the interns are not paid, it discriminates against people who have less fortunate backgrounds. And so you want to have people of all backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, have access to these internships, which allow them to learn about career possibilities in international affairs. So I would strongly support BPI's effort to get a paid intern or paid interns, and to support that, generally speaking, in the DC area.
And do you have any ideas on how we can get the kind of grants at the level to sustain with the, right now, again, a lot of interns don't just want a basic salary. They're looking for benefits. They're looking for a lot of things. So how can we get these high dollar kind of grants? Do you have any ideas?
Well, I'm only laughing because we had a committee after we were about to lose the Ford Foundation grant, composed of several people, including Jim Washington, the late Jim Washington, and we hired a professional grant writer. And because we had the funds from the Ford Foundation, so we said, let's use the Ford Foundation money as seed money to write grant proposals. And what you can do is do research in the Foundation Center in DC, but it requires expertise and knowledge of how these foundations work. I would urge BPIA to use resources to get a paid grant writer to assist the volunteer staff, because he or she will know exactly which foundations are susceptible to being open to providing grants to organizations like BPIA. And he will know, or she will know, how to market BPIA. BPIA has a lot of strengths. BPIA has an awful lot of strengths. And the most significant strength is its ability to nurture young minority African Americans who seek to enter into international affairs. So there are organizations who have that as their goal. Several come to mind right now, but I won't mention them here. If you want, I can communicate with you offline some ideas we had in the past. To you, yes.
Awesome, thank you. We welcome the ideas. Really appreciate it.
Michelle, I think you're mute. I think you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
Mute. Okay. Yes, I'm sorry. I don't know if I heard an answer to the question I asked, is if you have asked any of our partner organizations about providing paid internships. I assumed that you have.
Yeah. And they offer their own through their own organizations. And so their goal is to have, our partners, including the State Department, DOD, all of them have their own version of that. And we've tried to coordinate. I know for me personally, earlier in the year, the DOD in the international affairs and OSD, I'm with DOD, and we tried to coordinate an internship with them. Unfortunately, things kind of fell through because their priorities changed. And we started to see earlier in the year kind of a pause on DEI, and that has only increased, right? We've seen the increase in the last 30 days, dramatic, but it actually started earlier in the year during the campaign and election cycle. We just saw a shift in pausing from different partners at that level of engagement and commitment for internships and other But we still remain strong. As you can see, BPIA celebrating its 35th anniversary. And we have great partners like the United Nations National Capital Area, who's online today. We've done quite a lot of partnership with them with our Madam Ambassador program. And then, of course, the BPIA interned. We also had the United States Institute of Peace mentorship program, which was with a partnership between USIP and BPIA this year that I led, which was very successful. So we continue to try to tap into our partners, but our partners are also hosting their own sort of internships. Well, if there's not another question, I have one question. I know there's a few candidates on the line tonight that are running for the 2025, including myself. What advice would you give us on, really refining our leadership styles to match Barbara Patterson? If there's one leadership quality that you think we should carry forward, there's been a few named tonight, but I didn't know if you had any additional thoughts on a leadership quality that we should carry forward that you think is important at this moment, at this time?
Goodness, I'm hearing thunder. I think one of the most important things is, and you've heard us refer to this more than once tonight, maintaining high working standards, setting high standards for yourself personally. And this applies to your work with BPIA, your work on any job. It takes you far. You just have to set high standards for yourself and try with all of your energies to meet them. I think that's paramount. That's one of the most important things.
I would like to reinforce what Michelle.
How much do you expect of yourself?
Let me reinforce what you just said, Michelle. I think that I remember growing up, my parents told me we had to be better, we African Americans, than the others if we're going to get an equal treatment. So it's unfortunate. The world's not fair. I think BPI in particular should encourage its membership to set the highest professional standards and to maintain the kind of image that promotes African Americans in international affairs. They're doing so now, and I would encourage you to continue to do that, because you have to be good. That was a point when people didn't realize how demanding professional jobs are. Yeah.
Competence counts.
Yeah. May I say, in responding to Michelle, as a question, but or maybe a point that might be clearly seen as obvious, but in the drawing that you're seeing, as you said, and starting a few months ago, and is liable to accelerate again in the next 2 to 3 years. Pretty sure it's going to require a lot more of the old notion of self-reliance by the Black community in the United States, the people of color internationally, to rely more on our own resources that we can generate, that we can combine, that we can share, and that we can control, because it really does look, not look, I mean, what you suggest is already happening, that there's maybe a retraction and withdrawal of anything that's they see as smacking of DEI. So I think sort of internal community self-reliance is going to need to become a bigger part of all of our resource development strategies.
I have a term for right now. I think that we need to borrow from Harriet Tubman in terms of the Underground Railroad. I think that to rely on each other, which is what Mr. Yates said, to reach out to new partnerships, but don't make them too loud. That's what I mean by Underground Railroad. Do not bring any attention to you other than what's necessary, because it's going to be drastic. And also to reach out to the diaspora in Africa, in the Caribbean, in Latin America, wherever, because they're going along with their program, no matter what we're doing or what we're experiencing here, but they are looking for partnerships and they have money and they have resources that we can tap into and partner with and build on. So in terms of in the US, I would say, like I said, think of the Underground Railroad. Do not put your head up too high. I'm not saying don't hold your head high. I'm just saying don't let it be too visible because they will come after you.
I was also going to say is you're talking about the kind of qualities that Barbara had, and I'm just thinking that one of her many qualities was being open-minded and saying to yourself, well, why not? Oh, well, let me reach out to this person. Well, you can't do that. Well, but why not? So, in other words, just jump over that barrier and just uh, forge forward, if that's a term. In other words, just say, just keep going and be bold about it. And I hear what you're saying, Dorothy Davis. You can be bold about it, but you don't have to be loud about it. Am I getting your point?
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect. Exactly.
In
Thank
in the interest of time, we have about 2 minutes left. I see Kyle Balfour, his hands up. Cal, please feel free to come off mute and ask your question. And Kyle's will be the last question, and we'll take remarks from the panel, and we'll do a closing, and then we will wrap up in a few minutes.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. My name is Kyle Balfour. I'm the Executive Program Manager for BPIA, and I'm running to serve on the Board of Directors as Assistant Treasurer. And I am a current college student, but I am very active within the BPIA community. And I was wondering if any of you guys had any advice for young professionals who are kind of trying to navigate the international affairs space. You all have been sharing those different stories about how you were students working with Barbara Patterson, how you navigated your early, mid to like senior ranks within your careers. So do you have any advice, like very general, very broad, for any student or young professional that's looking to kind of advance within the international affairs space? Thank you.
I have a quick comment. Nothing stops young people today from having their own program of diversity, equity, and inclusion. They needn't necessarily call it by name. And as others have said before, many of us do it anyway. We just don't know that we do it or don't label it as doing it. And I would argue that in today's times and the times that are coming clearly ahead, this is the time to do it. Collectively within the African diaspora, we have darn near everything. And the demographers are saying that the future is African. And it'll probably accelerate if we take a Pan-Africanist perspective where we synthesize all that we have, harmonize it, and then put it into our service in much the same way that other ethnic groups have done. The East Indians, for example, the Europeans, Jews, and others have done. There's a lesson to be learned for us, a lesson that in many ways we've already learned, but now is the time to actuate those lessons. And to the extent that we do that, I think we'll come out ahead of the game in the long run, perhaps even the short run.
All right.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate what the panel members have mentioned throughout this discussion tonight. I think one of the ones that's probably going to resonate with me the most is what I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it correct. Makia, let's put in the chat things like competence counts and be bold but not loud. And I think that like that is probably going to be etched in my memory now, especially as a young professional myself.
Very good.
In international affairs and working in government and stuff like that. So I think this has been a really wonderful panel discussion, and I'm really glad that we were able to have some early and founding members here to discuss BPIA's history, BPIA's past, and more importantly, its future and what that will be looking like. And I'm very glad that we were able to have people join to get more tips and advice from our founding members about the direction and the ideas that BPIA and its members can take as we enter this new era in international affairs, especially given the circumstances that we're in with regard to DEIA and so on and so forth in our country. But if everybody could join me in giving a round of applause for our panel members, either physically or like virtually, if you want to use the react button to like, I see everybody doing it. Wonderful. Thank you. I will give the floor to the panelists to give some final closing thoughts. And then we will wrap up in a few minutes. So John, Cal, Zenobia, Michelle, Bertha, Cynthia, please feel free to give some closing remarks.
Those are.
Okay, I don't mind. If there's some young folks like Balford, Mr. Balford, I don't mind speaking to students in the evening. I'm really busy during the day. I'm writing a couple of books, so yeah. I live here in Stone Mountain, Georgia, and I've just since I moved here 3 years ago, I've allowed myself to be distracted because there's so much to do around here. But if there's any students or those early in their career, I put my phone number in the chat, and I'll do that now. And then if you want to talk, that's fine. A setting like this, there's only so much timing that we have. So if you need some advice, I don't mind folks calling me in the evening. I'm up until 11 p.m., so it's okay. And just good luck to BPIA this year. It looks like you're on a very good path so far.
And good luck to all the people who are running for different positions to serve on the board. And very glad we're able to have this at this time on this day. And once again, very, very happy that you all were able to join us. As Michelle Washington has put in the chat, please be on the lookout for the BPIA annual report on December 2. To all our members, so we can continue to see all the great work that BPIA has done over the year, and also what BPIA will be doing for the coming year and coming years and decades and so on. Bertha?
Yes. One of the things that we as a panel discussed was wondering, what is it that, I know some of you asked some questions this evening, but what is it that you are looking for, and how can the founders and the early members help you? What other kind of questions do you have that we can try to help with? And you don't have to answer that now, but it's just something to consider. Michelle.
I just wanted to say, I beg to the young people gathered here tonight, don't be afraid to use old folks as resources. Reach out to us. We're happy to help.
Yes, and speaking of which, for anybody who is interested in connecting offline with our founding members, please feel free to reach out to me. Put my email here. Members want to have tonight. I've been working with them over the past few weeks to put this together, so I'm happy to do an intro email to kind of keep the conversation going.
And don't anybody be offended by the term old folks, as I told you before in another venue from my birthday card. We're old, we're bold, we're solid gold. I'm good with being an old lady.
Old boat and solid
Here,
gold.
here, here, here. All right.
You can
Amen.
refer to yourself as seasoned. You're a seasoned citizen.
There you go.
Plus, it beats the alternative.
Yes.
Okay, well, once again, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Please be on the lookout for BPIA's annual report. And I'm sure in future months and years, we will probably be looking to put these together. Maybe every year as a yearly thing or as a bi-yearly thing or something. So our
Thank you,
members,
Michelle, for organizing this group,
yeah.
taking the lead.
Again, Michelle, also for helping organize this and
And Abby also, thank you
Thank
very
you
much
for
for your
everybody for stepping up to the plate. All you panelists, you were great.
Wonderful. All right, thank you all so much. Please feel free to.
Thank you,
Good night.
Abe.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Abe.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Thank you all so much.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Old, old, and solid gold. Thank you for that takeaway.
Okay.
Good night.
Musu, call me.